Hello everyone, welcome to our Another Champions Lunch with Fleet Plan today. Today I'm joined with Tom Reddy, who is an experienced transport manager and transport consultant. And some of the things that we'll be discussing today, specifically building a client base. The focus on this will be for people who are not experienced transport managers. So what kind of platforms you can use to build on your knowledge, advance your skill set. How to build a client base, as I said, and then also different kinds of platforms you can use in your job, so software and other things like that. If there are people watching this who have questions that they would like Tom to answer specifically, then please just bounce them in. I can send them over to Tom to answer for you. So without further ado, I'll start. If you want to just tell everyone a bit about yourself, firstly, and your experience as a transport manager.
Okay, well, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you very much for having me on today. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I'm currently an external transport manager. I try and keep my name on 4 licenses. I currently have 2 and 2 in application. Before I got into external transport management, I was an internal transport manager. And the last fleet I had was working mainly around tippers, and we had 80 trucks in London. So that was quite intense and was kind of the driver towards a better work-life balance. And so I tried to get towards external transport management, which I'm doing now.
Perfect. So large fleet, 80 vehicles is a lot of vehicles too. That might be something some people here are looking to working towards doing at some point, but I'm sure you can speak about that a bit as well. So in terms of, as you first come out as an external transport manager and you're newly certified, you're looking for work, what would you recommend to people in that position to help build a client base, build a network? You've got a very big network of, you're very well known as well. How do you work to get to that point when you've come out with having this transport manager at CPC? What kind of platforms would you maybe suggest people can use to get to that point as well?
Okay, yeah. So it is really challenging when you first start out as an external transport manager. Everyone trying to get their first few clients has my sympathies because it is tough. The key to the whole thing, I think, from when you begin is the networking aspect. And that can even start from, the kind of classes you're doing when you're doing your studying, and using social media to try and find other people in a similar position. And there are lots of groups available out there. I know Fleet Planner have a group on Facebook where lots of transport managers are gathered together. So that's a good place to start looking for opportunities. Another good service offered by some companies is almost like an agency. They act as an interim between transport managers looking for work and the clients who come to them maybe for other services. So they'll have a bank of clients. And if you get in touch with them, give them your details, your situation, and they normally can pair you up with suitable clients. And there's a lot of advantages and some disadvantages to these systems, but I've found work quite successfully that way. So I would definitely recommend getting your name out there, searching for these companies and getting registered with these agencies. And Fleet Planner do that. As you know, you've found me one of my favorite clients. So I would definitely recommend people get in touch with you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really good way to do it then for people watching. One of the things I wanted to ask was, what was something that you didn't know when you were just newly a qualified external transport manager that you wish you had? This can be anything to do with a business you dealt with. It can be to do with platforms you use, as you said, or just people management skills. What was something that you maybe didn't feel prepared for that you can manage very well now?
Yes, I mean, because my background is a driver, so coming from that to a situation of any kind of people management is always challenging. So that would definitely be a big one for me because it's not necessarily wasn't my happy place all those years ago, taking responsibility for people and directing them. At the same time, I would encourage people not to get put off. It is a skill that you develop. No one's born being a leader or a manager. So don't walk away from it, but just starting small is always a good. Don't try and jump into a fleet of maybe where you've got 10 or 20 drivers and think carefully about the industries you're going into, because some will be more kind of newbie friendly than others, maybe. And in general, the list of things I didn't know and still don't know, is quite significant. It's a complicated industry, so don't be put off thinking the learning curve is so steep, because it is. But you do every day. You get some new piece of information, some extra thing that's going to help you. Your network builds, and so there's a lot. But don't be put off. Have confidence in your qualification. I think that's a great basis to start from, because it's not easy to pass that exam, and just build from there. There is a lot. Definitely.
I mean, it's probably a transition from people sitting the exam for the theory of all of that to the practice of doing it and managing those people, and you actually being responsible for these fleets. So how did you, I know that you might touch on how you prefer the work-life balance you've got now with not managing a fleet of 80 vehicles, but for people who maybe are aspiring to build their way up to that point and then maybe drop down like you have, how did you feel? You said people should start small and then work their way up. Is that what you did as well? Do you think that that's quite crucial in terms of not jumping in the deep end and just throwing yourself into managing 100 vehicles in a fleet straight away?
Yeah, I mean, it would be very difficult to get a start, and this is the problem across the industry, from driver level to low level management positions. It's very hard to get started. Definitely, I think being a driver and also then going into the office, because from driver, it's a very hard transition to make into any kind of other position. It's a little bit dead end sometimes. You really have to push. And I put myself into a driver trainer position, and then the transport management opened up from there. So the ideal situation, if you want to get into big fleets, is to try and get into the traffic office somehow, whether that's a driver trainer, if you've got a background in driving, maybe in the traffic planner situation, some kind of maintenance position, although they can be harder, but definitely something in the traffic office so you can get a feel. And you will find there is a step, a natural flow from there to grow. And quite often getting involved with a large fleet where it's not entirely resting on you, but you can take part. So very large fleets will have a whole system of multi-level managers. And so that can be a good, again, it's not the easiest to get into those positions, but keep trying. And I would definitely recommend some time in a traffic office before trying to jump into a substantial fleet as an external. If you wanted to go external straight out off the exam, it can be done, but again, I would recommend starting small, maybe an owner operator, something like that, so you can get a feel. And also in that situation, find someone to mentor you and help you along the way, because you're not going to be able to do it from a standing start without help.
Okay, perfect. So starting small, if you're an external transport manager and you take on a client who's just recently got their operator's license, is a newly incorporated company, for example, and doesn't have any experience with the transport industry, what kind of check would you suggest people do to shed light on something about their client that might facilitate a better relationship? I can understand from my job, if you understand that they don't know enough about the compliance, then you might invest a bit more time in explaining those things to those clients, especially if you're starting out with those small companies first to move up to the larger fleets. So what kind of checks do you think you should do to help that?
It's a really good question, because I think a lot of people rush in when they get their certificate of professional competence. They just think, right, I need clients, and they just take the first ones they find on offer, just in a hurry to get named on the license. You really need to do the checks on your client, because it's such a close working relationship. You need to know if that's going to be something that suits you. So definitely have a long conversation with them, say half an hour to an hour on the phone to start with. I know we can't meet face to face at the moment, but that would always be my preference. And beyond that, if they're a limited company, there's a lot of searches you can do online, such as Companies House. Have a look at their filing history, see what sort of turnover you're dealing with. Maybe you can make an estimate number of employees. It will have a bit of background on there. If they've held licenses before, you can find their information on the Traffic Commissioner's search facility. So if you search applications and decisions, you can see any history they've had against their name or their license or their company. So that can be a really useful tool for kind of getting a feel for somebody. You'll also be able to see who their previous transport managers were, if that applies. If they're a fresh operator and they've never operated in trucks before, that has good and bad sides. That's good for you, means you get to set the tone for how you want to go moving forward. But it also means if you're maybe not sure about particular topics, they're going to need a lot more guidance, and so are you. So definitely sort of seek some support from another transport manager or maybe a mentor situation with that. And go actively searching for more information. So the statutory documents which are available, the resources online, read applications and decisions for your traffic area, see what kind of decisions are being made on operators, who's applying, and the outcomes and things like that. That really is good to give you a regular feel of how the traffic commissioners look at individual operators. You cannot be passive in this job. You have to be actively always developing yourself and looking for the next bit of information.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So based on that then, I know we don't like to target these things or make it out like you as a transport consultant or transport manager, you wouldn't want to take on a client, but what would be a red flag for you looking and reviewing and doing these checks on clients for you to question the operator, and whether, as you said as well, building on your knowledge, looking at the decisions made at public inquiries, maybe what might dictate whether it would be a successful relationship with the operator, or you're about to embark on taking on a client where you're going to face some very serious difficulty, potentially some issues with the traffic commissioner.
Yeah, so it's important to know if they have had previous license history and perhaps previous license problems. It's important you know about those problems. So obviously ask them about it. If they've told you there's no problems, but you find a problem on a search of their license history, that's something you need to dig deeper into. As I've been doing it longer, I wouldn't say it puts me off if someone's had maybe a previous problem, but it would definitely make me then go into more detail. So make sure you know their history and that you feel they're being honest with you. You get a lot of this from how they feel on the phone. And something I've learned over time is, how good is the communication between you two? Are they easy to get hold of? Do they pick up the phone when you ring? Because how I treat my clients, if I see them ring, I'll pick the phone up pretty much regardless of the situation. And I feel like that should be a two-way street. If it's not, and you can never get hold of them, or you feel like it's hard work, maybe you start getting anxiety about every time you have to contact them, that's probably not going to work. The other thing is, and it's very divisive topic, is pricing. Someone inquires your services as a transport manager and you give them a price. If they start questioning and quibbling on the price, or say, oh, can you do it for this? Or, everything's really tight. I would start to read into that what else is going to be further down the line that's going to be a problem on the money side. Because as we know, and maybe it's not spoken about very much, but the financial side of transport management is absolutely key. And if they're quibbling over £50 a month for you here and there, what else are they going to be quibbling over further on? And I just think it sets the wrong tone, and it shows maybe a lack of respect for the position, it can be quite common. But those two things, communication and your financial negotiations and their license history, I would say, all those things.
Definitely. I think those are really good points actually about communication, and then those three factors, the prices and their history, because all of those things play into maybe perhaps their mindset as well as an operator in terms of their approach to compliance. You as a transport manager, it is your job to obviously manage the compliance, but you need to have a client who's willing to work with you and cooperate with you. You can't just leave it. So I think on that note, it would be really helpful to clarify, and you've said you're well read on the applications and decisions by the traffic commissioner when people get issued or brought up for a public inquiry. What would you say is the relationship or responsibilities of a managing director of a company and a transport manager in terms of where do they fit in? Does a managing director still have the main responsibility, or do you feel like the transport manager has to take a lot of that?
The transport manager definitely has a lot of responsibility. And I think quite often we see this underestimated, perhaps by newer transport managers. If you become subject to an investigation or a roadside check where things don't go quite right, they are going to come in and look at your procedures, and you are going to be answerable as the transport manager in a similar way as the managing director. So I think you need to have a good relationship and a communicative relationship with the managing director. So you're working together, understand that you're both going to be liable, because apart from the company's operator's license, you have your own repute to think about as a transport manager, and regulatory decisions will reflect on you, and that will stay with you for your career potentially. So don't take any of this stuff lightly, I guess, is treat it as if it's your company. And if you don't feel like you can, particularly as an external in a smaller one, then start thinking, is this the right situation for me to be in? And trust your gut on the trust relationship you have with the other people in the business who are responsible. Is the managing director, do you feel they're a good person? Do you feel they have your interests? And do they want to do the right things? You need to think about all these things, but definitely do not underestimate that responsibility that you hold. And it's a debate as well. Some people think external transport management is not worth it because of the amount you get paid for the amount of responsibility you're expected to. And that's an interesting topic, probably a video in itself, but I still enjoy the job despite all this, and that's why I still do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. With operator license applications, that's something that I manage a lot, and it's something for transport managers to know is, as you've said, if you're going to take on a client whose license then gets revoked because of lack of trust in the relationship and a lack of cooperation with the client, the transport manager's reputation on the line from a public inquiry as well. That is something when a new application gets submitted and that transport manager's on a new application, they will be questioned about that by the traffic commissioner. Yeah. If you can avoid being in a situation where your reputation can potentially be, brought down, try to avoid it, because they will question it, and that's not something that a position that you want to be in.
No.
For you, Tom, I'm just going to present it on the screen, and maybe you can answer it.
Sure.
So, can I just search the Office of the Traffic Commissioner's website for license numbers and company names, or is it possible to search individuals' names also to see if they have had previous licenses with this use? Yes,
it's a good question. The search function on the OTC website is really, really powerful. It's not always very user-friendly in that it will give you a lot of results for a search term, but you can search by individuals' names, company details, company names, your general area, and license numbers. So that's a lot of information if you don't quite know where to begin. And this comes into, if you're seeking help from another transport manager or something, or you see someone comment online, it's very publicly available to search for that individual on the OTC website. So you can perhaps see how many licenses they're on, what their history is, and it helps you measure, do they really know what they're about, or do they have experience? It's a really, really powerful search engine, so don't underestimate it, but you may have to go through a few pages of results to find what you want. But yeah, a really, really useful tool for transport managers.
Definitely. Very good question. Thank you. Please keep firing questions in if anyone has any others as we're going through, and I'm sure Tom will be very happy to answer them for you.
Of course.
Carrying on then, another thing that is quite important as a transport manager, always with the law and rules and regulations, things are always changing. There are always going to be updates. There are always going to be things that are underway for change. What would you suggest to new transport managers, experienced transport managers, to keep up to date with those rules and regulations so that they don't fall behind in any way with the law?
Yes, yeah, it's another thing, and it's the first thing I suggest to most of my operators as well as other transport managers I speak to. When you pass your exams, you're on nobody's lists for any information coming to you. You have to be active, going and looking for it. And so there's a lot of government websites and government mailing lists you can sign up to, such as the Moving On blog. The traffic commissioners do a mailing list which you can sign up to. You can sign up to applications and decisions to get that fed into your mailbox every week when they release them. Saves you going to look for them. So immediately get on all of those. You can think about membership organisations such as CILT, the RHA. Bear in mind all those things come with a cost, but all the OTC traffic commissioners mailing lists are free. And you need to be keeping an eye on the statutory documents because they do update them sometimes as much as every few months. Might just be a small update, but they are a goldmine for information. The only issue with those documents is they are written in a legal language to some degree, so they can be hard to interpret in some way. So just stick with them, don't give up on them, because they're an absolute goldmine for questions you've probably wanted to ask but never thought, where's the answer to that? What's the responsibility of the transport manager? What do I actually have to do? It's all in there. And for any externals, I particularly recommend starting with document number 3 for transport managers. And that should be, almost on your bedside table, but don't recommend that.
Hopefully that won't send people to sleep before bed. No, I think that, as you said, knowledge is very empowering in this role. And so if you can build on that and advance that, and you can find ways to interpret sometimes the legal language that is used, then you'll find that will be very applicable in practice to sometimes with inexperienced clients. It will just be a matter of being able to explain it to them, because you're always going to get clients who ask why.
Yes, of course. And I want to know.
I know why. Then that's going to be very favourable. It's going to work in your favour very well.
There is a small point on that. Quite often people will ask information online on, say, Facebook or the social networks. You shouldn't be basing your information and experience on the advice of others all by itself, because you don't want to be in a position where somebody asks you a question, you say, oh, my mate Dave said that. He's a transport manager, he knows. You need to know where the information originates from and use that information from Dave. He might be very knowledgeable, but then go away and try and confirm it with either the statutory documents or the legal documents to make sure you have a clear idea. Because this stuff goes out of date so quickly, you'll get a lot of people who 20 years ago were right on the cutting edge and they've not done nothing since, and now things have moved on. And just have confidence in where to find this information and then use it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also applicable with what I've experienced with operator licenses. You'll get people who call and say, oh, my friend Paul told me I don't need one. And they do. So, but the point is that they called because they were confirming some way through speaking to someone like a transport consultant like you, Tom, or us, or looking up on the internet just as confirmation, and not just assuming that what they've been told by a person is always the actual correct answer. We do actually have another question, Tom, so I'll just present it on the screen for you. If we can go through it. So I'm a manager for 4 startups and I only have a few vehicles. I started doing course for one of these and now I'm a fully qualified silver practitioner. There is no limit to the number of operators I could do this for. So how could I expand my client base?
It's a very good question, and it's something I'm sure on the mind of a lot of transport managers, because if you're an external transport manager for 4 smaller operators, you may not be making enough to sustain the full-time salary that maybe you're used to. So you will need to explore other avenues. And 4s can be quite divisive. A lot of people have opinions one way or another, but in this case, 4s can be a very useful tool for you to use. It's linked to the industry you're in. As he says, he's a practitioner. I would definitely recommend speaking to the companies who actually audit on behalf of 4s, because they can bring you work on a more organized platform than trying to find it yourself or to try and push 4s yourself into companies. But yeah, that's where eventually all external transport managers might want to think about the services they can offer on a wider basis, such as being a transport consultant, going to help people with their restricted licenses, because again, that expands your scope. Maybe 4s, maybe looking to earned recognition. You do have to be a bit creative because there is this problem of the low salary for smaller operators. But yeah, definitely it's FORS is it's whether you like the system of FORS, because it doesn't hold a huge amount of weight, if any, with the traffic office. So very much treat it as an addition, but don't necessarily push it on your clients. But yeah, I'm just trying to think if I've answered the question for him enough. Put it this way, it's a problem we all have. You could look at other ways. Driver training is another one. Becoming qualified driver CPC, trainer, maybe your own centre, join a consortium. There's a whole range of things you can do, and FORS is definitely part of that list.
Yeah, definitely. I think hopefully that has answered the question for Graham. And on the note of what you were saying about restricted licenses, I think that's something a lot of transport managers don't always aim to use as a way to provide compliance support. Even though there's not a requirement for them to be on the license application, if a restricted license holder has history with licenses or something like that, it might be a requisite that they want, or a requisite that they want you to have a transport consultant or transport manager overlooking their and that's something you can support them with to maybe expand your client base as well.
Yes, and don't underestimate the problems with restricted operators. I think there's a tendency to think of them as a small fry and maybe just leave them be. But there's a lot of people who operate quite significant fleets on restricted licenses, but because they don't have a legal requirement to have a transport manager, their compliance may be lacking in so many ways. And I see this a lot. And so you can help them quite significantly, but quite easily with your knowledge. So restricted operators are definitely recommended to touch base with as many as you can.
Yeah, we've got some more questions, Tom, so I'm going to have to keep
fire away.
So I think Daniel has got another question as well. So he says that there are some Facebook groups that suggest they're better than paying to join an industry organisation. What do you think in terms of this and CPD?
Okay, so it's a very good question. It addresses the situation on social media and the Facebook groups. Facebook is hugely valuable for networking, but I think it should have a huge red safety flag right above it, especially for new transport managers who don't have the confidence in all the answers. If you're looking for CPD, bear in mind the traffic commissioners are looking for you to have CPD. CPD is continuing professional development. For those people who don't know, this is to say you are continually learning, pushing forward all the time, taking appropriate training. I would want reputable companies' names on the top of any certificate that I present for CPD. Otherwise, you have to question how seriously you're taking it. And of course, all these organisations like the RHA, like Logistics UK, CILT, they all started very small, but those are the ones you should be looking at, in my opinion. Of course, there's a whole range of training companies who will be teaching the Transport Manager Certificate of Professional Competence and the 2-day refresher. They're all accredited. So again, those are the sorts of places you want to be looking, but treat Facebook with the level of respect that it generally has. It's a useful tool, but you need to know how to push it aside, and I can't word it quite correctly, but yeah, treat it with caution massively.
Yeah, I think we'll probably try get onto that as well, as a bit more detail about the impact of social media on the role as a transport manager. I have one more question, so I'll just read it to you. But I think you'll find that this is quite one of the questions that you'll get quite a lot. So being nominated on 4 licenses is obviously the maximum. How much time can you devote to extras such as training and other things, while also trying to stay in compliance with the hours that you need to spend to satisfy the Traffic Commissioner's Office? Okay,
so the Traffic Commissioner will get quite involved with you at the point that you decide to go on 4 licenses as a transport manager. Whatever your feelings on that, that's the facts of the matter of the past 18 months or more. Aim for 48 hours of work per week. If you're pushing for more than that, you're going to trip yourself up eventually. So just be honest with how long the clients take. Base your decision on the recommended hours given in the number 3 document. So make sure you're familiar with them. If you need to give more or less, then justify it. And do not forget to take into account all your travel time to and from operating centres, because they're all going to attract some amount of travel time. take that into your weekly working hours, and limit it to 48. And that's all the advice I can give you. A lot of people want to drive full-time HGV and be an external transport manager on the side. You are going to find difficulties doing that because most HGV drivers work well in excess of 48 hours week to week, although their average might be 48. So I still drive myself occasionally. I might do an odd Sunday here and there because I have capacity in my hours to do it. But if you calculate everything for 48, no more, you're not going to go wrong. And then that gives you your guidelines for your pricing. Decide what you want to earn per year and make sure you don't undersell yourself because you only have 48 hours to play with.
So then within those 48 hours, if you're dedicating that amount of time, how much time do you get during the week to advance your knowledge with training or other platforms as well? How much time would that leave you? Does that leave you with much time or an hour a day?
If you're genuinely working 48-hour week, you will find you're quite busy as an external transport manager. There's a tipping point you get to when suddenly you're starting out, you think, oh, I've got nothing to do, and maybe you're kicking your heels at home, and then start realizing you're flying around everywhere here and there. Problems come up that you need to deal with. And it's another good, the limits exist for that reason, and that's why the traffic commissioners are hot on it, I think, because they want to know that you're able to cope with it. My advice would be aim for less than 48 hours, because 48 hours of genuine work, you are going to be busy.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. I hope that answered another question for you. So we just touched on it. I think maybe we could go into a bit more detail. So with social media, there are some obviously very positive, things that you can get from transport manager pages and groups to get work and different things like that. But what would you say is some of the negative impacts and ramifications of being in groups like that as a transport manager and finding work as a new external transport manager as well?
Right, yes. So as we've touched on, Facebook can be a valuable source of information. And for me personally, it's been a valuable source of contacts. I've met a lot of fellow transport managers on there, some who have gone on that I consider friends, and some who would be my first port of call if I wanted to bounce an idea off or check something in a mentoring kind of relationship. So I am very grateful for Facebook for existing in these and having these groups, but it can be a very negative place. It can be full of, and don't underestimate the amount of just wrong advice that is on there, completely incorrect advice, but people swearing by it that it is correct. So be wary of, have confidence in your own qualification, and be wary of whose advice you buy or whose advice you take on board, because you have no way of verifying one person to the next. And I see a lot with particularly newer transport managers, they'll ask a question and they'll get 20 different versions of an answer, and they're no better off for having asked that question, which is a real shame. And because we're dealing with middle-aged males predominantly onwards, no one is backing down, no one is admitting they're wrong. So one quality I always say of the transport manager is being humble enough to understand that you don't know everything, to accept maybe when you're wrong, and not to double down on it. Just like go, okay, that's caught me out, go away, learn about it, and just be very aware about the wrong information you might get on Facebook. And the negativity, it's something I really try and push hard against, because there's a lot of people who've been in the industry a long time, perhaps in some very unhappy positions in work. They might have a very negative picture of the industry and they'll try and push that onto you. Leave that as their problem. If you enjoy the industry and you're excited about it, which you should be, it's a really cool job, this, I think, then yeah, embrace those who are positive about it. And I think over time you will learn to filter out the people who are valuable to you and people who are just going to bring you down. But just be wary of everything on Facebook, because I see it every day, and there's a lot of bad advice on there.
Yeah, so definitely, as you said, approach Facebook with caution. Not everything that is on there is completely accurate. So if you're approaching it with caution and you are trying to validate some of the information you've got about whether it's correct or not through government documents and guidance, but you're still troubled to find an answer to. Sometimes there will always be a practical kind of case where there's never explicitly an answer online. Where would you then suggest these transport managers go to get an answer that will be helpful and not completely inaccurate and just an opinion that someone may have?
Right. So when it comes to applying very specific cases of legislation where you don't quite know where your operation fits in, that's where membership organisations can be really useful, because once you're a member, they normally offer up to a limit. There's advice there, advice that is generally accepted to be correct in the industry, mostly. So CILT, the RHA, they will be able to help you. You might want to think about some transport solicitors. If you're not in touch with any, then definitely make that step. Obviously, there's no free advice in this world. If the advice is free, you have to start asking why. But transport solicitors, if you're really stuck and you need an answer on something that's important, they're a great, and now I can recommend some, but the good ones who are very prevalent in the industry are well known. So just touch base with them. They all have email addresses. They're all quite happy to offer a limited amount of free advice if it's just introductions. And transport consultants who've been in the industry a long time, but and this isn't easy to judge at first, but the ones you can go to for advice, because maybe the clients they work for or their history, which is all searchable online, of course. Mm-hmm. And get yourself half a dozen people who you can bounce an idea off and measure for yourself. And if you don't know where to find something, chances are they do, and you'll do the same for them in time. So would be my advice there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some really good advice for people who don't know where to go after a certain point. So the other thing that I wanted to discuss with you is ways to streamline activities as a transport manager. So you might have 4 licenses now, for example, and you need to be able to manage all of the reports, all of the documentation. What kind of platforms and things would you suggest that you found really helpful to have to streamline tasks and save a lot of time and effort in managing all of these different licenses?
So you can't do this job without some form of software, and I'm pushing very heavily towards software and away from paper, because I've seen how much time it saves and how more efficient it can make things. So you will of course need software for tacho analysis. There's no way you're analyzing that on your own. And there's a huge range of software available, but it's nice if you can get it all in one place. If your tacho analysis software also has the maintenance side, so your maintenance planning, your defect reports, your driver walk around, perhaps on an app. I'm really a big fan of the apps, because especially for external transport managers, you get a real-time feedback of the drivers doing their walk rounds, mm-hmm. what time they were done and how long they took and things like that. So like I know Fleet Planner have a very comprehensive system of software which you can use. And they'll do your tacho analysis. They have vehicle tracking. It is beneficial to have your software all in one place. And advice I give to external transport managers is try and take charge of that element yourself. If a customer already has tachograph analysis in place, ask them, do they want to continue with that one? Maybe you can change to one that you prefer, and then have all your clients on the same bit of software, so you get to master it. But yes, move away from paper as much as possible, move towards software, and don't be afraid of specializing in a few pieces of software. You'll probably have to learn how to use the main ones like Tachomaster, etc. You're not going to escape it, but really embrace the software that is moving on with technology and makes the most of what's available now with mobile phones and everything else. But extremely valuable, particularly maintenance software now has come on so far, even in 5 years. So definitely start looking at software for maintenance planning.
Yeah, definitely. And from an operator perspective, the sooner you implement stuff like that, the better. If you've just got the license, then it's highly recommended that as soon as you start operating, that you have software or things like that in place to facilitate holding all of that information in one place, as opposed to dipping the software while you're doing things on paper because then you don't have records. You've got records scattered everywhere, and you don't want that to be the case, because it can prove to be quite difficult if you get asked for it later down the line.
There's this, yeah, you need to be able to lay your hand on it really, really quickly. And what still surprises me in the industry is vast companies with fleets of hundreds of vehicles still using paper-based defect reporting. And to my mind, when I was managing 80, we were still on paper, and I was eyeballing every single one of those daily defect reports between me and the transport manager, and it took just forever. And I have to question, if it's not taking those big companies forever to analyze those defect reports, then what are they doing with them? So the advantages of electronic reporting are just enormous now. Yeah,
definitely. We have another question, so I just thought I'd present that on the screen for you, Tom. So someone put, "Hi guys, can you give a brief step-by-step example of an agreed position as external transport manager for 3 18-ton vehicles, getting a contract sorted, where to get templates for this type of contract, and then arranging a health and safety template, seeing what the company has." So how would you approach this, Tom?
Okay, so there's a lot of questions tied up in there, isn't there?
That's why I put it on the screen.
For a 5-minute introduction to full-on setup. There's a lot to get sorted. 3 times 18-ton vehicles, that's a nice size to start with. He's mentioned getting a contract sorted. You have to have a transport manager contract. It's one of the most important things, and as I go along, I realize how important that contract is. And my advice would be, pay to get a professional one done that suits your needs. There are templates online, you'll find them on the Facebook groups, which will do the job, but they're basically duplicating the information found within the undertakings and within the number 3 document. And it doesn't make any allowances for your personal needs and situation. So spend a lot of time on your contract, get it to a place you're happy with. And you can speak to transport solicitors, the RHA, about getting those sorts of documents, because don't underestimate their importance. I touched on a good point about insurance, public liability and professional indemnity. You are responsible for the decisions you make, and you're going to make decisions that have financial and legal implications for the operator. So if you make a wrong decision, you're going to want to make sure you have cover for that. And that's where the professional indemnity comes in. So again, spend some time with that policy. There's companies available online that, I don't know, there's no point in me advertising one particular one. If somebody wants a recommendation, I can do that personally. But you put public liability, professional indemnity into Google and you get the results. And the covers will start from £250,000 liability up to 5 million, and you can decide how much you want to pay. Health and safety templates, these are things you can pay for, or things you can, again, if you've got knowledge of health and safety, you probably have your own templates by now. But speaking to consultancy companies like Fleet Planner, they have these sorts of things available to buy. They've done the hard work for you, and you can be confident in the quality. There's lots of people who want to sell you templates, and we see this all the time. Somebody will ask for, has anyone got a template for this, template for that? And then 20 people jump on that subject and say, oh, can I have that if you're going to send it? Because everyone is lacking, or feels like they're lacking, these templates. So again, there's lots of resources out there. Just be careful of the ones you buy. In terms of reviewing what the company has in place already, that's on a case by case. You have to go in there and see if you're happy with. Bearing in mind, a lot of these policies and templates are written to go in a folder and on a shelf and never be looked at again. And that's the last thing the traffic commissioners want to see. They want to see effective policies and procedures that actually work. So spend some time applying any procedures and policies to your own, in this case, 3 18-tonners. What are they doing? What are they carrying? What bodies have they got? How far are they traveling? Who are the drivers? What are they doing? You really have to think about all this stuff and get the policies in place that is accurate to that operation, and understand that they're not interchangeable. It's really worthwhile getting that stuff right.
Definitely. And I think it's really important, as you've emphasized, that a strong contract that you've had drafted with yourselves, landing clients and things like that, it's really, really meaningful, and it's very much worth investing time and money in getting a contract that is very well drafted implemented, because it will help you in so many ways if you ever encounter any problems in the future, and it will save you money as well if it's really bad. And so it's definitely something that I would always recommend to people as well, that you make sure you've got a really solid, strong contract in place that you can use. So I hope that helped.
That person needs an hour's conversation on the phone, really, probably, with that. So by all means, reach out, or one of the, I can put you in touch with lots of good consultants, and Fleet Planner are available for that as well. So don't be afraid to send an email.
Exactly, yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. So we've got another question, any advice for integrating technology into the transport manager role? So I think that's touching again on software. Is there any other suggestions you'd make about technology being implemented or used in your role as manager?
So there's some that apply much more specifically to external, or not specifically to, but just I would encourage, get your vehicles with trackers. So you know where they are, what they're doing, because you're seeing them probably at best once a week, maybe twice if a problem comes up. You don't know where they are, what they're doing, where they've been. The trackers cost nothing these days, less than a tenner a month per truck. So get a tracking system installed, and that will help you with everything, but also you're missing mileage. When you're rectifying where the miles have gone without cards in. Hopefully you haven't had many of those, but so get a tracking system, get your drivers on a walk around app, off paper, just personal recommendation. If somebody has a strong pushback, which there's lots of resistance to it because drivers don't like change, but really keep trying. If they say no, then 3 months later, try again. Do you want to have a look at this app? It's really easy to use. They're getting more easy to use all the time. Passionate thing of mine, forget your wall planners with stickers, because it's a waste of life. Get a digital maintenance planner that can be updated with a few clicks of the mouse, and you're not reprinting things, pulling stickers off the wall. It doesn't make any sense to be on a wall planner anymore. Again, this is advice you will get from a lot of people. You must have a wall planner. No, you must have your maintenance planned out for 6 months. How you do that is up to you, as long as you can evidence that. So get that digital planner in place. And like I say, the system of uploading your inspection reports to that maintenance system, so it's all tied together. You have a defect, you have the rectification, you have the invoice, and it's all there for you. Otherwise, you're going to be drowning in paper after about 10 trucks.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. So someone else has put, have you got any thoughts on the DOT tacho system with trackers, based on your advice of GPS tracking for being implemented in vehicles?
Is he talking about the smart tachos?
I'm not sure. Perhaps you might need a bit more detail. If you're this person, you're specifically interested in getting some more questions, then feel free to reach out to Tom. I'm sure he'll be very happy to discuss that with you in a bit more detail as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Post your details below and I'll get in touch with you.
So in terms of just wrapping this up then, what would be your last piece of advice to external transport managers that you think have the biggest impact on helping them build client bases, or just anything that you think is really quite crucial to know that you've learned over time, for all of those watching?
Right, no pressure then. No pressure. I have confidence in your qualification because it's not easy to get. You have a good knowledge base there, but understand that you never stop learning. So keep pushing for the new information. If you're not spending your spare time reading some dull transport book, then you're probably not heading into it the right way. Surround yourself with mentors and people you trust, who you can bounce ideas off. Not to say take all their opinions as gospel, but someone you can trust to give you decent feedback on new legislation you read or things you're not sure of. Keep up with your CPD. Always be looking, particularly related to your operation. Perhaps you've got someone doing ADR, someone who wants to travel in Europe. Tailor your CPD to things that are going to be useful for that operation, and the specialists, maybe they do lifting operations, you don't know anything about that. There's always things you can learn, and just be careful of the advice you get on social media, because it can get you into trouble, and the people who are giving that advice are not going to be responsible for that trouble in the end. So approach with caution, but networking is so key to this industry, particularly when you start working for yourself. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and give freely of your time, as you might wish that other people would give freely of theirs to you, and build those long-term relationships. Like, among ourselves, we speak quite often, Fleet Planner. So, I'm grateful for all these contacts, and you might know somebody coming around the corner in a few weeks and say, oh, Tom can help with that. And round it goes like that. So you're not going to do it on your own, same as so much in life. But yeah, don't be afraid to make those connections and get those trusted people around you.
Yeah, and as you said, sorry, that you do learn on the job, so don't expect that at any point you're always going to know everything, because things are always changing, and you're always going to be learning new things on the job, and that I think in itself is appeal to those watching. Being a transport manager, there will always be things, there will always be questions and scenarios that you never anticipated that you'll find yourself in, and so it's not going to be boring.
No, that's the thing. I think I noticed a drastic change from when I was a full-time employed internal manager, and the very few hours you got to yourself at home was very much like, I can't be doing any more transport management stuff today. But as external, some way your attitude changes, and you're always looking to the next bit of information, and okay, it crosses over into your personal life a lot more, but I find it really, really interesting, and that's kind of what gets me up in the morning to do it now, rather than having to be there at 9 o'clock or whatever, 6 o'clock. You really, if you want to do it all the way, or probably don't bother, because you've got to get into it.
Yeah, and as we've just wrapping up then, some of the other platforms that we didn't mention, so Tom has got a podcast that will be launching. I'm sure you can reach out to him to get more details on that, but this will be a fantastic way to keep yourself aware, to just listen and tune into some interesting conversations about what it's like to be a transport manager in the industry. There's not a huge amount of things out there, so if you are interested in popping that on your phone while you're driving or anything like that, then obviously you've got Tom who's going to be doing that again with questions and things to do with external transport managers, membership for companies. Feel free to give Fleet Planner a call about that as well. We do have many different things we can offer with that. So thank you for all of you watching, and all of the really great questions we've got.
Yeah,
thank you, Tom, for joining me today. It's been great. So thanks, everyone.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.